And in in the wintertime, in the off season, all of that water is let out. It's called winter pool, and it's essentially back down to the historic river levels back prior to when the dams were built. And now you've got our small river flowing with wide open areas of mud banks. And that is an ideal habitat for these pelicans to stop, rest. They have a wide open area where they can see any potential threats, any predators, because these are big birds. It takes them a while to get the momentum going to take off. So they like to have big areas around them to see. And then they stay together in these colonies, and they will feed in the river as well. They usually eat fish and small aquatic animals. And the neat thing is when these pelicans arrive here in the spring, it's always a question of where are they? They will sometimes be at Mississinewa, sometimes they'll be at Salamonie, and even from day to day, they will sometimes all pick up, fly around, and move to a different spot. It's almost like a little Where's Waldo kind of game on finding where the pelicans are. A lot of times people, they'll spot them, they'll post them on Facebook. I think if you follow our Facebook, just Salamonie Lake or Mississinewa Lake, on Facebook, you can see our recent postings of our American white pelicans. And it's just quite the sight to see. It's not something that you typically think of when you think of an Indiana bird or an Indiana waterfowl. And the pelicans really do bring a lot of interest. And it's kind of a fun challenge to try and find where they might be. An interesting thing about them is just their sheer size. These are massive birds, and they can weigh up to about 30 pounds. I think typically they're around 20 pounds, and their wingspan is the second largest wingspan of any bird in North America, second only to the endangered California condor, which is a vulture out west in California, Arizona, and Utah, that area. So now I would like to mention another species that we often see here in Indiana, and that is our bald eagles. We are incredibly privileged to have bald eagles in this area. Our bald eagles, we have a population that is year-round, so we see these eagles. They have some of them have permanent territories in the area, and in the wintertime, especially early in January and February, we will get a huge influx of bald eagles from the northern regions. Typically, it's during these months where the cold weather starts to begin to freeze up open water. And that's what these bald eagles absolutely need in order to find food and a reliable supply of energy. And after those northern lakes and rivers freeze over, they start to come down. And one of the first stops of open water is Salamonie and Mississinewa Lake. Our dams provide a unique opportunity where choppy waters exiting the dams for several miles are liquid water year-round, no matter how cold it gets. And that's one of the first stops that these bald eagles find that they can reliably fish. So in January, we hold an Eagle Watch. It's an early morning Eagle Watch, and that's one of the most hardy, toughest groups of people that come to our programs. They wake up bright and early, usually 4:35 in the morning. They come out to Mississinewa, and we hop in our cars and we drive out to this eagle roost. And we're out on a bridge. It's cold, it's freezing. Everybody's huddled up with scarves, and we're just peering through sometimes blizzardy snow, trying to find all of these eagles that are roosting in these trees, maybe about a half mile upstream on the river. And this year, I believe we saw maybe around 20 to 30 eagles at that roost. And it varies depending on what year we're talking about. Sometimes we've seen, many dozens of eagles, all the way up to maybe 80, over 100 some years. And it really just kind of depends on the year, on weather conditions, just on what's happening. And then in February, we have a different kind of eagle watch here at Salamonie Lake. And that is an interesting one because it's in the evening and a little more accommodating for those that don't like to wake up so early. And we take those folks out on several stops around the lake. One of them is at Lost Bridge East. Yes, Lost Bridge East. And that is an excellent spot for birding because you have panoramic views of the Salamonie Lake. And out on Monument Island is one of the largest eagle nests in this area. It is huge and it has been here for many, many years. And these eagles go, there's a pair of eagles, they return to that nest every single year. They build onto it. And right now, kind of fast forward to today, in March is the prime season where eagles are laying on their eggs. So they are currently incubating those eggs as we speak. And it's also one of the most sensitive times for bald eagles. So if you are out here enjoying the nice spring weather, hopefully we get some warmer weather coming up. But if you are out here and you're on a hike and you happen to come across a bald eagle's nest, be respectful, be sensitive to those eagles. This is a very critical time in that development of laying their eggs. And of course, bald eagles are federally protected under the Migratory Treaty Act and also the Bald Eagle Protection Act. So it's important to give them the respect that they deserve. Some of the locations around here that are best for viewing eagles would be going out to our beaches. That's a nice location, especially early in the morning or kind of late in the evening. Another location is on the dam. Occasionally, eagles are seen kind of flying up and over the dam when they are finished exploring the lake for food. They kind of go up and over and then might roost in the evening on those trees downstream. And then, of course, here at Salamonie, that Lost Bridge East is an excellent spot to find eagles. You kind of need a pair of binoculars if you wanted to see that eagle nest at that location, but an excellent spot to see them and to see the nest as well. So here at Salamonie, here at the Interpretive Center, we also have a raptor center, and it has 6 live birds of prey that we have here on site year round. And all of these live birds of prey we have under an educational permit. And that allows us to have these birds of prey. They are all injured in some way. So some of them have injuries related to vision. Maybe they were struck by a vehicle in the past and they were taken up to, I believe all of them, to Soaring Hawk in Fort Wayne, rehabilitated, got back to health, and then given our location, we had vacancies, so we were able to take those and use them as an educational ambassador, just to educate the public, educate folks. We take them to school groups as well. And I have 2 individuals with us today that we get to kind of review in a little more detail. So I'm going to go ahead and step off screen for just a moment. I'm going to pull out our red-tailed hawk first, and we'll go over and talk about her history, and about red-tailed hawks in general. And then after that, we'll move to our second bird. So give me one moment. I have to put on a big, thick leather glove and get her on my hand.
Hey, Chandler or Teresa, so this is kind of a statewide thing. We have people from northern Indiana, which again, we're lucky enough to be close to the Salamonie. Any bird watching down in southern Indiana or any parks you can mention that you guys partner with?
So there are several great state properties to enjoy all across the state. There's a property within an hour of every person in our grand state of Indiana. And there are also a lot of fish and wildlife properties that are really great. So folks really enjoy looking for birds in the Muscatatuck area. Goose Pond is pretty famous. Both of those are down south. We also have some really large reservoirs down there. Monroe Lake, Patoka Lake, and Brookville Whitewater, that complex, have some great bird watching as waterfowl head through for the year. And there's just, really great locations that people don't think about right in everyone's backyard. So we
And
think, of course, Salamonie and Mississinawa are the best, but there's awesome places across the state.
And Teresa, I'm going to say this. If you guys, if anyone goes to the state fair, go to the DNR location. It's a wonderful spot.
All right. So this is our red-tailed hawk, and she's been with us since 2013. And it's interesting because when she was first found as a younger hawk, she was quite underweight at that point. I think a concerned person, they found this individual, they were concerned, they reported it, and then this hawk, this is a female, she was taken up to Soaring Hawk and rehabilitated, kind of brought back to health. At first, it was a little bit of a mystery as to what exactly was wrong with this individual because she seems visibly fine. She didn't have any broken bones, but she was significantly underweight and unable to fly in that moment, probably because of exhaustion. So after rehabilitation, they did evaluate her with a veterinarian, and they determined that it was her vision that was her primary injury, her issue. The source of that is kind of unknown, whether she was born with that issue or if it was an injury. But poor vision in raptors, in birds of prey, is really a major detriment. You have to have absolutely perfect vision in order to hunt effectively. And that's what these raptors need. And that's just something that for some reason she wasn't able to have, and that caused some major problems. So she's not able to survive in the wild. If she was released, then pretty much the same thing would happen. She would have very strong difficulty obtaining food regularly and would likely suffer a lot. But we have her here at Salamonie. This is one of the birds that we have on display at our Raptor Center. And you can actually come here at any time. You can walk around our Raptor Center and see them in person. And this is also one of our individuals that we take out regularly and teach and talk about with school groups. But a little bit about red-tailed hawks. So you can see this is a large individual. And she's a little bit larger than your typical red-tailed hawk. In general, female individuals are larger than males, and that's pretty much the standard in the world of birds. Females are typically larger because they need a little more resources to build nests, to lay eggs, to raise their young. So their body is built a little bit stronger, a little bit beefier. And also, this individual, she very much likes some of her favorite foods that we have, which are mice and rats. She is very well fed, but we try to keep her at a very healthy weight. Regularly, we take these birds in, we do maintenance on them. Sometimes we have to trim their talons, make sure their bills are growing properly. And another thing is we record their weight regularly. Now, one thing you might notice about this individual, she has this beautiful kind of reddish tinge to her breast. And on the back side, you can see this lovely red tail, which is their namesake, the red-tailed hawk. So some of those are your biggest identifiers if you want to spot these out in the wild. And red-tailed hawks are one of the most abundant hawks that we have in North America. They are widespread. You can see them in every single state. Not sure about Hawaii, but every single state in the continental United States. And these birds prefer mostly to live in open wooded area. So they particularly like forest edges. They like to perch in a high vantage point. This could be a tall tree. It could be telephone poles. It could be any other tall structure. and that gives them a good vantage point to look around and spot prey. And they hunt using a particular strategy called ambush hunting. And once they find what they're looking for, whether that is a mouse, a rabbit, a squirrel, they will take off, they'll fly down, and then they use these incredibly powerful talons, grab onto that, and they have an incredible strength about them. They can squeeze down with a lot of force, and that's how they acquire their prey. And then sometimes, if it's small enough, they'll just gobble that down whole. Otherwise, they will try and fly up and eat it piece by piece. Now, of course, I did mention these powerful talons, but also one feature of all of our birds of prey, kind of distinguishing them from other types of birds like your songbirds, is this pronounced hooked bill. I don't know if you can see that from her vantage point. I think so. But that hooked bill is incredibly strong at ripping the prey apart. And that's kind of what they do. These are some of our apex predators, fierce predators of our natural environment. And they really are. They're at the top of the food chain. They can eat just about anything that they come across, whether it's snakes, rodents, even some small amphibians. And pretty much nothing bothers themselves, especially if they're healthy and able to fly away. They've got plenty of hardware that can defend themselves. Now, another thing about red-tailed hawks is their iconic call. I'm sure you have heard this, especially on TV, but they have that kind of wheezy, descending screech call. And that is often depicted in Hollywood as the sound of any hawk. So any hawk that will show up on screen, Hollywood tends to put the call of the red-tailed hawk. It sounds very intimidating, very fierce. And then us naturalists who are a little more aware, are a little more aware of some of the calls and the species. Sometimes that's a little frustrating. They'll show a bald eagle and they'll play a different species as it's called. And we're like, that's not right. So if you learn that call and get that in your head, then maybe you can spot that in a movie that you're watching. Now, one of the key features of a red-tailed hawk that you can use to identify, especially if they're flying or soaring, you can't quite see that red tail sometimes, or if they're perched. Sometimes you might try to take a look at their belly. Hers is faint, but most red-tailed hawks will have a dark band on their belly. We call it a belly band, and that's one of the field markers that you can use to actually identify this species, especially if they're perched and their bright red tail is not quite visible. So I think I'll go ahead and put this bird back in her box, and then we will transition over to our second bird of prey that we have, which is a great horned owl.
We'll see if we can get a picture of a great horned owl up on the screen for you while you do that. Has the birds ever attacked you guys? They kind of looked pretty heavy at you there, Teresa, Chandler.
It looks serious, doesn't it? So these birds think that we are their predator. And so they're keeping an eye on us to make sure we're not up to no good while we're holding them. If they were to get frightened, they would squeeze more. The impact would be through their talons. And the beak is more like your knife and fork to do the fine detail of getting that food in their bellies. So if they're uncomfortable or frightened, they squeeze pretty roughly with those strong talons that Chandler was talking about.
And then can you also oh no, I appreciate that. The other question I had is, can you mention again how many birds you have at your center?
Yes, absolutely. We have 6 birds of prey that we have at the Raptor Center, and all 6 of those are on display outside, and they can be seen pretty much anytime. Even if the building here is closed, you're able to come and visit and see those. All right, so we're going to move on to our second bird of prey. This is a great horned owl, and I hope you guys can see them. Sometimes they like to look at me, especially with their good eye. This guy,
That's a good angle.
yeah, this guy also has a vision issue, and you might not be able to see it on that camera, but his left eye has been damaged, and it's our belief that he was struck by a vehicle early in life, and I believe the left side, so his left wing, was also injured. So those are the two injuries that kind of makes this guy so that he wouldn't be able to survive out in the wild. And he was also brought to us in 2013. So they both, the red-tailed hawk and our great horned owl, were adults when they were brought to us, or when they were taken into captivity. So, and we can tell based on the plumage of these individuals. And then we've had these for 12 years. So they were at least 2 years old when they were found. So that means that these guys are at least 14 years old. It's kind of a little detective work when we try to figure out how old these animals are, because wild animals, they don't have birth certificates or anything. So it's our best guess. My hunch is that this individual, this guy, is a little bit older than 14, just based on just some of the features and characteristics of him, but it's really hard to guess exactly. Now, great horned owls, these guys are another apex predator, and truly so. There is essentially nothing that bothers or messes with these guys. They're kind of the king of the forest, and that's really their domain, is the forest, in particular at nighttime. And great horned owls, they're very similar to our red-tailed hawks, and especially if you consider their feeding habits and also their range. These guys are active and seen all over the United States, essentially the same range as the red-tailed hawk, except for a few exceptions. And these guys, like I said, very active at night, in particular the late evening and early morning. That's when these guys are most active and the most likely that you'll be able to go outside and hear them. Of course, they're way more commonly heard than they are seen, and that's because of their incredible camouflage. So you might notice the feathers here in front are this beautiful kind of mottled black, gray, white, and brown all throughout the body. The backside is very similar, a little more dark, and all of those features help these owls blend in, because the whole name of the game for these owls is to see at night and not be seen. And that's how they effectively hunt at night and are successful in what they do. Now, that seeing part is probably the most fascinating thing about these owls, about these animals. They have exceptionally large eyes. If you were to scale this bird up to the size of a human, then the eyeball would be about the size of a softball. And that takes up almost all of the volume inside their skull. Most of their skull is vision and dedicated to vision. And that's just a unique adaptation that allows these birds to see and hunt effectively at night. Another aspect of owls that's a little unique and kind of interesting is their hearing. So their hearing, a lot of times people think it's these little tufts of feathers. Now, this individual, he likes to hold his feather tufts down flat. That's just his unique behavior. But typically, great horned owls will have these two feather tufts kind of prominently displayed on top of their head. And those are really just for show. Those are not their ears. Their ears are not even located, not even at the base of those. Their ears are holes in the head, in their skull, on the side of their head. And the interesting thing about owls is most species of owls will have one ear elevated a little bit higher on the skull than the other. And that allows them to kind of triangulate where a sound is coming from. So they typically hunt by perching in a tree, scanning their environment with their big eyes. They can see a lot better than we can, than most animals can at night. And they're listening. They're listening to the faintest little rustle of leaves. And that difference in height of their ears allows that sound, which has a speed, okay, it's not instant, it does take time, and it will reach one ear first and then the second a short time after. And that allows them to triangulate exactly where that sound is coming from. So they use that in combination with their eyes to swoop down and ambush their prey. One thing you might notice about him right now is he is panting right now. We call that guttural fluttering, and that's just kind of passing air up over its membranes in its mouth. Essentially, he's trying to cool off. That's a behavior that we do notice when they're a little stressed. Because like Teresa was saying before, this is still a wild animal. And he views me and kind of the people around us as a little bit of a threat. He's a little uneasy about that. These aren't birds that have been in captivity since hatching. These are wild animals, and they still retain a lot of that wild instinct.
We have a question about the differences between a barred owl and a great horned owl.
Oh, very good question. A barred owl is another owl that is very common here in Indiana. That's an owl that is more commonly seen in dense forests than the great horned owl. The great horned owl is very well adapted to a variety of different environments. You can see them often in cities, in agricultural areas, but the barred owl is more typically seen in those dense forests. It's smaller, probably about, I want to say a little more than half the size, weighs considerably less, and also has a different diet. They eat smaller animals than the great horned owl does. The great horned owl is capable of eating and taking down prey as large as a skunk, which is impressive. I mean, that is a big animal. And the great horned owls have one of the strongest grip strengths of any raptor in the world. Their grip strength rivals that of a bald eagle, and they can actually squeeze down with the power of around 500 pounds per square inch, all focused on their talons. So they can deliver a very powerful blow to an individual. Another difference with these guys is that is a difference in their calls. So it's very easy to tell the difference between a great horned owl and a barred owl by how they sound. So the great horned owl is your typical hooter owl. They just kind of go hoo 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 hoo, that kind of sound. And then the barred owl is much more dynamic in their calls. And it sounds more of a who cooks for you, who cooks for you all. That's what it sounds like. That's the mnemonic of that. And they will sometimes, the barred owls will sometimes get together in groups, and they will kind of cackle and howl together. Almost sounds like a little band of monkeys in the forest, all getting together and making a lot of noise. And when you hear that and you see that, it's quite something to be a part of and to witness. All right. Do we have any more questions about the owls?
So I did a little poll and asked them to vote which was heavier, the red tail or the great horned owl. And there were not very many votes, but 3 people said the red tail was heavier.
Yep. And I'd say that's pretty accurate too. The owls in all of the birds that we have are a little lighter than they do look. They have a lot of adaptations that make it so that they are as light as possible, because these are animals that have to fly and they have to carry their weight all around in the air. So they have hollow bones that reduces weight. They have air sacs inside of their body in a very unique way of breathing. So all of those aspects make these guys a little bit lighter than they look. A lot of what they are is fluffy feathers. And of course, that keeps them warm in the wintertime. But that's a lot of the volume that you see. Very good. I'm going to go ahead and put this guy back, and then we'll move on to our next topic.
Maybe Jeff can show us some more of the birds from our raptor center that we gave him some pictures of.
Teresa, which one would you like me to go to?
Well, here's the American kestrel. Let's try out the barred owl, since we talked about it. There he is. So you can see him with no feather tufts on the head. There's our screech owl.
Teresa, I know I've asked this before, but do these owls have names? Do you name them?
We do not have names. That's part of a DNR policy and way that we educate our visitors, especially kids, to help them understand they're not pets, that these are educational ambassadors that we only have with us because of the permit that allows us to use them for education and the fact that they would not survive on their own. As you look at this screech owl, you can see he's squinting one eye. That eye had a piece of a stick get in it when he was first learning to fly. So he doesn't have that binocular vision that'll give him good distance judging. Chandler, we have one more statement here that wants to know about habitat loss or how that might be affecting these birds.
Yes, absolutely. So regarding habitat loss, and habitat loss really does affect all of our species in different ways. And it's not always detrimental to a particular species. One example with our red-tailed hawk is with the increased fragmentation of the forests in Indiana compared to historically. So back in the 1800s, when we had much more forest cover over the state, that's opened up wide areas of open land. And that's actually beneficial to red-tailed hawks because they require an open area with trees and tall things to perch on for their hunting behavior. So that's one species that has actually increased in response to a change in habitat. Now, similarly, our red-shouldered hawk, a very similar type of hawk to the red-tailed, it has a different behavior, a different hunting style, and it's more of a forest-dwelling species. It hunts faster prey, things like small birds. It hunts things like squirrels and things that live in the forest. It's a little more agile, so it can fly in and around trees and denser vegetation. So that's a species that has dropped. So that's just one example of many in which a changing landscape over time can help some species and harm others. It's fascinating to read and learn about some of these things, but that's one example that I know of. With the owls, some of these species of owls are quite adaptive. Many species are able to withstand changes. One that I can think of is our tiny little screech owl. I believe you saw an image of that. They have adapted very well to urbanization across the country, and they can easily go into towns and cities as long as they find appropriate nesting locations. They're a cavity nester. So if they can find a little cavity on the side of a building or in structures or other vegetation that are in backyards often, they can thrive and find a home very easily. So those are just a couple examples, but those examples are everywhere. Habitat changes and habitat loss affects everything. It's very much interconnected. So that was an excellent question. Thank you for that.
Quick question. Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
Just real quickly, for those of us who are beginning bird watchers or don't have as much experience, can you just list off a couple resources that you use in terms of helping identify birds? Just real quickly, because I need help.
Absolutely. One easy thing is picking up just a field guide. There are different field guides that are available. Those kind of help clue you in on what you're looking at, what you're paying attention to. I personally use the Sibley field guide, but there's also a Peterson and an Audubon field guide. Some use actual color photos and some use illustrations. It's really just your preference. There's a lot of technology nowadays that help people identify birds. A very wildly common one that I really have a lot of good things to say about is the Merlin app, which is developed by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And they have developed this app that customizes the birds in the app to your location. So you really only see the birds that are where you are. Sometimes it can be overwhelming when you are flipping through a book that has 600 different species and you're trying to find the one little brown bird that's in your backyard. Yeah, but this app really narrows that down to what's very likely around you, which is really nice. And it also has features where you can record the sound around you and it will live interpret that and make its best guesses as to the species that are singing, which is a great way to start to pick out some of those songs and calls and start to pin those to a particular bird and learn how. I really, if you're a beginning birder though, it can be overwhelming if you have high ambitions, but really just take it slow, focus on whatever is most common around you. One of the easiest ways to get started is to simply make a list. Just open up a blank page on a notebook and just write down the birds that you see that you're able to identify. Write down a robin, a blue jay, a cardinal, and you can either make a life list. So these are all the birds that you've ever seen in your life and just have that grow. And another thing people will often do is make a yearly list. And that's something that's kind of neat. And it's still early in the year, very easy to start one of these right now. Just start making a list of all the birds that you've seen in the year and see how many you get up to. That's a great way to just allow you to focus a little bit more on the birds around you, especially when you go on a hike or something, and just keep tabs on that. And that list will slowly grow. And that list is an increasing list of birds that you have slowly become more familiar with over time. So those are just some of my recommendations. Picking up a physical field guide or using those apps can be a great resource for that, for learning how to identify these guys. And it's not only about identifying birds, it's also just about appreciating them. These birds that you see through here are just gorgeous. And some of these birds are going to be these early spring migrants that we're going to be seeing. We've been having our year-round residents, and soon we're going to be getting a lot of new birds. So that's kind of why I suggested you might want to start a list. Right now, one of the first spring migrants that I have become aware of are the American woodcocks. They have just zipped into my backyard, and they are such a fascinating bird. They're very early. They often arrive in March, early March, and then they have one of the most fascinating breeding behaviors of all birds. The males will do a type of sky dance where they will fly straight up in just a straight line way up high in the sky, many, many yards up in the sky, and then they will just kind of fall down, making a sound as they go. And that's just an unusual breeding behavior, something that's really interesting. I have yet to see that behavior, but I do hear them. They have this nasally kind of beep sound in the forest around me. Another area of migrants that is about ready to start are going to be our wood warblers. There might be a few that are here right now. One of the earliest warblers that arrives is the yellow rumped warbler, but many are very soon going to arrive. So here in the next few weeks, as warmer temperatures start to come, the migration has actually already started in the southern United States. So it's very soon that these warblers are going to arrive in Indiana, probably in early April throughout May. And that is a dizzying time for birders that really do want to keep track of these warblers, because you can have an influx of 50 different species all in the span of just a month. And many of those species of wood warblers, they arrive here in Indiana. It's just a cacophony of sound in the forest. They are singing like crazy. And then many of those species continue on up into the northern areas, such as Canada, Michigan, and so on. And they actually leave Indiana. And then we will get those back on the fall migration later. So those are some of the things to look forward to. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about is hummingbirds. They are actively starting their migration up north. And people get really excited because seeing those tiny little hummingbirds buzzing around is just such an encouraging sign of spring. And they're going to arrive here in Indiana right at the beginning of May. So you kind of want to start planning that, getting your bird feeders ready, making sure they're clean, getting that nectar mixed up with some sugar, and then you can get those out right around May, and that'll draw those guys into your property, hopefully. I believe we've got a question. Is that right?
Yes, about sandhill cranes and bird flu updates.
Yes. The bird flu has been going on in Indiana for the past couple months. And from my knowledge, the bird flu is primarily an issue with waterfowl. Less so, to a much less extent, does the bird flu affect our songbirds, but it can in some cases. But it's mostly an issue with those waterfowl. And I believe we've had several cases, I think in southern Indiana, where some groups of waterfowl, like our sandhill cranes, they have succumbed to that. It's a sudden illness. Usually when these birds contract that illness, they're not sick for very long. They very quickly succumb to the effects of that illness. I believe that this can transfer over to poultry, which is part of the problem that we're seeing nationally. And it can be transferred to humans, but that is exceptionally rare. And really, if you just use some common sense, if you are ever involved closely with waterfowl, you just need to make sure that you are taking steps to clean your hands very well, maintaining a clean environment. And also you as someone who has backyard birds, keeping your bird feeders clean. It's probably a good idea every couple weeks to pull your bird feeders in, do a thorough clean, a rinse. If you want to be extra safe, you can maybe soak them in a little bit of bleach and sanitize them, dry them out, and then put them back with some bird feed. And that will help at least a little bit with the spread of not only the bird flu, but many different diseases. That's an excellent question. So thanks for that. So I'm going to wrap it up a little bit with just a few things that you can do. If you're interested in birding, if you're interested in getting out into our state parks, one option is purchasing one of our annual passes at state parks. I believe for most people, that's $50. If you're 65 years or older, then it's only $25. And that lasts the entire year. And it gives you access to all of the state parks that we have and the reservoirs. And that's just a great way to, a little bit of motivation to get outside, hike these trails, see these birds, whether it's our eagles that are here at the lakes, the warblers that are rolling through the forests, or even maybe you can spot some of the pelicans here at our reservoirs, which would be pretty neat. And then another thing I did want to mention is planting native plants in your backyard is an excellent thing that almost anybody can do. It's pretty easy to do. And that is a great way to incorporate wild native habitat right in your backyard. And that does many different things to bring these animals up close to your place. A lot of our native species are hosts to insects that are native here in the United States, to Indiana. And those insects are really the foundation of all of our birds. When you've got those warblers that are sweeping across the nation up toward Canada, they're fueled by bugs. And it's so important that we have habitat that supports that foundation of the food chain, essentially. And if you are more interested in that, we actually do have a plant sale coming up, and the form of that will be shared. It has dozens of different species of plants, of shrubs, trees, flowers, and we here at Salamonie have done all the research to make sure that every single plant on that list is native here to Indiana. So if you are throwing these in the ground, you can't go wrong. It's not going to be a guess as to whether or not these are going to do harm to the environment. There are many invasive species that have been planted that cause problems. So nothing on this list is anything like that. And those plants, they often grow up, especially like our bushes and things, and they produce berries. Not only are they beautiful, but in the fall, you're going to have the fall migration of birds. They will be eating those berries. That fuels their journey back down south. And that's just one of the best things that you can do. Another aspect is kind of on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, and that's removing invasive species. Bush honeysuckle, I think many people are aware of that, but that's a plant that spreads prolifically. And it was actually once planted on purpose by many people to control erosion, but it has since proved itself to be an extremely invasive plant, and it degrades habitat, and it also is harmful to wildlife as well. Often these migrating birds will gorge themselves on these little red berries of the honeysuckle, and that does not provide them with the proper nutrition that they need. And sometimes those birds are seen dead during their migration. Researchers will find those and will investigate the contents of their stomach, and they'll find it's just full of these berries. So they really do cause problems. We have a couple events called weed wrangles, and that's where you can volunteer your time to go at specific locations. All you need to do is bring a pair of gloves, in an attitude of getting your hands a little dirty, and we supply everything else, the loppers, the pruners, the herbicide, and we go out and we identify, we learn what these invasive species are, and then we'll spend 1 or 2 hours out there. Usually they're beautiful days, and we just chop down these species, apply herbicide, and that restores that habitat. That is providing an instant restoration of decades of progress that these invasive species have been doing. Our most recent one that we have coming up is actually this weekend. It's this Saturday, March 22nd, and it's 10 to noon, and that is at Paradise Springs in Wabash. I believe we've got a flyer for that. I know that's short notice, but if you are free this weekend, feel free to participate in that. The next one that we have coming up is April 26th. That'll be 1 to 2 p.m. at Mississinawa Lake. That's another great opportunity to volunteer your time and directly help the habitat and the land that's pretty much comprises our natural communities, especially here on public land. It is in a lot of need of attention with these regarding these invasive species. And then the last thing that you guys can do for everybody listening is really just invite people out. if you go on one of these weed wrangles, try and invite your friends or your family. If you get an annual pass and you decide to go visit one of our parks and go on a hike, invite people to that. It's the invitation of others in your own personal circles that really develops a strong sense of community. And that's really what's going to create these awesome memories. And that's really what the DNR and our interpretive staff is all about, is creating these awesome memories outside in nature. So I'll go ahead and stop talking. We'll see if we have any last minute questions, but it has honestly been a pleasure talking with you guys today. So thank you for having me.
And we appreciate you having on, Chandler. Again, with the partnership with the DNR and Purdue Extension, it is some of the most fun times getting out there and doing these sort of things. Real quickly, I did put the link to the post-program survey in there. 3 times the charm. That link should be up and running. We appreciate your guys' input. So we're grateful for that. But yeah, Chandler and the voice that you guys heard, Chandler's been our front man, but I'm going to bring the Teresa Rody is also part of that team there at the Salamonie Interpretive Center. She does a great job with Chandler, and again, very fortunate to have them here in the northwest part of the state. I will say that weed wrangles are not exclusive to the Wabash Huntington area. They are all over the state, so be aware of the different invasive species groups for that, and the different birding opportunities there are, especially now that we're kind of going back and forth between spring and winter. There's going to be opportunities to get outside and do some of that fun stuff. So if there's any more questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We got a few more minutes left, but I'll go ahead and stop the recording. And again, Chandler, thank you so much for being on today. Same with you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
And then for those who are left on, our next Hot Topics is going to be April 17th. That is going to be Conifer ID with John Woodmansey. Very fun topic, a lot of good information, and we'll see you guys.